welcome everybody to Illuminate, Navigate, Radiate, Journey of Emotional Resilience. I'm your host, Brandon, and I'm excited to bring you this journey segment today. It's one I've been kind of working on for a while, trying to find some time. So I'm really excited, and it's a privilege that this time was made for me. So I'd like to introduce Chef Devan to the podcast. How you doing today, man?
I'm all right, man. A little sleepy. Just flew in from LA, but I'm excited to be here. I'm very grateful that you're taking the time out as well.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I know you're busy. I know you got a lot of big things going right now with the cookbook just coming out and doing some stuff around that. So again, I'm excited to hear your, journey and story a little bit more. I've seen some bits of you talking about it and really caught my eye. So just kind of like going into it, where do you see the importance in sharing that aspect about your life, like sharing the struggles you've been through and those things that have happened in your life? Where do you see the importance in sharing that as you do all this other stuff?
A lot of that, a lot of what I'm sharing now, with respect to recovery through substance abuse and things like that, those struggles, those trials, those tribulations, a lot of it is stuff that I suppressed for a long time. It's a lot of it's a lot of feelings and emotions that I never shared. So that's why one of the reasons why I'm doing it so much these days is to just let it all out as much as possible and use my platform and leverage my platform for as much good as possible, so that people out there can say, okay, this guy who's traveling all the time, doing such cool events and like having so much fun, he's human just like me, right? And he struggles with things, and he's not always feeling okay, and he has bad days, and he has this dark past and stuff from back in the day. So I just feel like it's really important to share that as much as possible, with everybody out there. It's something that I never used to do before. So it's it's a nice journey I'm on.
Yeah, no, and I just want to say congrats. I saw you recently hit, 3 years of sobriety, and I thought that was awesome that you shared that. And I liked a lot of what you had to say in that post. I could see, the relation and my struggles with addiction and different things like that. So I think that's really really huge when somebody who's so busy and has so much going on can still take that time to kind of sit there and reflect on those things that you've been through and those struggles that you've had. So kind of like just going into that aspect of things, was that struggle with addiction and substance abuse, was that struggle something that started young, or something that kind of came a little bit later in your life?
It started for me at a very young age. I was probably 12 or 13 years old when I started to dabble in that lifestyle, to be honest with you, man. Like there was a lot of insecurities in me. There was a lot of resentment that I was developing at a young age. And yeah, when I discovered substance, or that I could alter my state of consciousness in some way, it's just something that appealed to me a lot. I felt icky. I felt cold prior to kind of numbing myself or escaping the reality. And when I got a hold of marijuana or alcohol or whatever it was, it was definitely an aha moment for me. Like, hey, I don't have to deal with this shit right now. I can just feel some other way than how I feel right now. And yeah, that, from 13, 12, 13 years old, it progressed and progressed over the years, and it got worse and worse, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and with like you mentioning the insecurities that I know I can relate to that a lot. But I started using young. I was 11 or 12 when I started experimenting a little bit. And I remember it's hard to explain the way I felt, but the insecurities is covers it pretty well. Like I just felt like I didn't belong anywhere, and I felt like I was just carrying so much. And so like you know trying that for the first time is something that just changes your life, right? When you're already feeling like that and you realize you don't have to deal with that stuff anymore, you don't have to carry that anymore. That's a big change in your life. And did it progress fast for you, or was it like kind of like a slow, like weekends, some nights, or did you just kind of jump into that lifestyle right away?
No, I mean, It's all been really challenging, to be honest with you, man. Um, Sorry, what did you mean by that? Jump into the lifestyle right away?
Yeah, like did you start using a lot right away, or was it like a slow progressive thing where you were, just using a little bit here and there when you could? Because at a young age, it's hard to get your hands on it, right? Or it can be. So was this
Man,
something you started? Yeah, go ahead.
I've always been super resourceful, bro. I've always been a very, very resourceful guy. No, I jumped both feet in head first, like right off the bat, man. I've always been very extreme with the use. It's not something I'm proud of, man, but like I've always been very, very like very extreme, to be honest. Is the only way that I could put it. So I wasn't someone that like, just kind of like 1 foot in, 1 foot out, or just like, I was right. I was all in all the time.
Was it something that like people around you noticed, and was it something like that you shared with people? Is like, was there any concern, getting into that stuff at such a young age for you, and were you able to kind of like let that out to anybody verbally and talk to them about what was going on?
Some people around me definitely noticed. You know, I also tried to keep people away, keep people at bay. People that would call me out on my bullshit, those are definitely not people that I wanted around. And in fact, I just kind of kept people around me that helped, that enabled me. Essentially at the end of the day. So yeah, there was definitely some friends who saw that that said, "Hey man, there's something going on here, or you should probably get some help, or this is not normal." But those are the people that I pushed away, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and at a young age, did it ever hold you back from any opportunities? Like, did it ever prevent you from doing something? Because I know in your video you had talked about being a functioning, user, right? Like you could do things at a high level, but still have that on the side. So was it ever something that like really took over your life, or were you able to always kind of function and manage?
No, man, like there was a lot of ups and downs over the years, to be honest with you. There were a lot of really, really dark, difficult periods. I always felt like I was able to manage it because that's my ego just kind of telling me, "Yo, you got this in check, you got this in control." I was a very high functioning addict as well. So I worked my ass off. I did a lot of amazing things. I threw a lot of great events. I judged on Food Network. I was on billboards in Dundas Square in Toronto. Like I did a lot of cool shit. I was on TV all the time, I was doing a lot of cool stuff, but I was punishing on the inside for sure. But a very high functioning addict. And I think one of the reasons why was to just try to convince myself and everyone around me that there wasn't an issue.
Yeah, no, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And just to kind of tie in that, your cooking lifestyle and what seems like a really positive outlet for you, was that something else that like you fell in love with at a young age and you always had that, or how did that love for cooking come about for you?
Man, I was always obsessed with food. Since I was a kid, I was following my mother and my grandmother around the kitchen, licking whatever pot spoon I can get a hold of, man. I was always drawn to it. I remember watching Emeril Lagasse on TV as a kid and being like, man, I really want to be like this guy when I grow up. And I was young. I was really young. I remember waiting hours in line at Indigo on Richmond Hill as a kid just to get his autographed book. And in fact, I'm at my parents' house, and that book is like in this bookshelf over there. Every now and then I flip it open to just kind of remind myself where, where I came from and how far I've come and stuff like that. But yeah, no, I was just always obsessed with food, man. And I do like to look after people. I've always loved doing for others and taking care of people. These days, I try to do it with as much anonymity as possible. To be of service, but without praise and recognition is really, really important. Something that I want to practice more and more, and something that is a daily practice. But cooking is like a way that I can look after people. I'm good at it. Yes, I learn every single day, and I travel so much to learn as much as possible. But ultimately, like I'm decent at it, and I can look after people by cooking for them, and that's one of the reasons why I cook, and it's one of the biggest reasons why I cook. Like if you come over and I make us dinner, like I'll take my time plating your food, but I'll just kind of take everything and throw it into a bowl for me, and I've always been that way. And then at an early age when I got cooking, just that analogy or just that explanation that I gave you is like I realized how much I love to nurture and nourish people.
Did do you think that played a role in like that want to nurture? and take care of people. Do you think that played a role in using substances and like feeling that empathy, for other people and wanting to be there for them? Do you think that that played a role in like getting addicted to that feeling of different substances that you use?
Yeah, man. I mean, like ultimately at the end of the day, I just wanted to feel some way other than the way that I felt, to be honest with you. That's all that I was looking to do. I was just looking to escape and numb myself and just kind of get out of my head. Like I had just developed such poor emotional intelligence at such a young age that it's like any way that I could get out of my head, I would do it, man. And that's where I found comfort. And it just became normal. And then I learned to live my life around that.
Did did you ever have a like a choice at times like between cooking and following that passion and like noticing like that substance use or that addiction was kind of getting in the way or stopping you? Like was there ever a moment where you felt like you had to choose or that you started to lose that passion for cooking because you had that use going on as well?
It's a good question, man, to be honest with you. And I would say I was in active addiction for like 24 years. So like A to Z happened to me during that time, to be honest with you. I smile now, but like A to Z happened in that time frame. And with the cooking, bro, to be honest with you, it's like with all the shit going on in and around my life, I guess I knew I had to make a career somewhere, but like I was always cooking. Like it's just what I did and it's what I became. So when I graduated culinary in 2010, like it's just what I did. That was what 14 years ago now, right? I started cooking in like '07, '08 kind of thing. But once I graduated, that's like it's just what I did. I just cooked. So I were there times where I was probably like, man, cooking's not for me, or I want to get out of this, or it's not working. Like, sure, I'm sure it happened. I mean, I've been through blood, sweat, and tears with this career. But it's just part of me who it's just part of my identity. It's a part of who I am now. And I'd have it no other way. Like I eat, breathe, sleep food to this day. Like I'm gonna go have some lunch after this, and I'm already gonna be thinking about what am I having for dinner, and I'm gonna be thinking about like the tacos I was eating in LA yesterday. Like it just consumes me, and I've been this way my whole life. So it's just a part of me, man. The cooking thing. Like it's just it's there. It's there. Will my career path change in 5 years? I don't know. I don't think so. But like you can't take the food out of me. That's for sure. You can't take the love for culinary out of me.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And like as you started doing that more and more, right? You said you graduated in 2010. So as you started maybe get some more opportunities with it, and it started like maybe you seeing that like this can become a career, this can be something that I can make something out of. Was there ever a time in like that where you would say you had a really dark moment and realized like you know the use is starting to cost me opportunities or it's starting to like cost me different aspects of my life when you were getting like kind of getting that rolling?
My accountability many times went to shit. There were events that I missed. There were events that I showed up to, but I was banged up, real rusty. Uh, Everything under the sun. Man, I remember like I was late. I was partying or something the night before. I can't remember what it was, but I was late getting to Canada AM and I was filming. This is years ago, man. It's about probably 10 years ago. More, but I was late and they called me and they're like, "Where are you?" And I think I had shown up late or I'd missed something before with them. And right then and there on the phone, she blacklisted me, bro. And again, I laugh now, but I was shattered at the moment, right? And there had been things like this that was a pretty big one, but there had been things like this that had happened over the course of my career where I knew I was on the verge of losing a lot of credibility, and I just wasn't setting a good example, uh, not for people around me, or for myself, or for the brand. So there were many things that had happened over the years. I was quite resilient, though. I remember going into work on no sleep quite a few times, as opposed to just not going in. I remember going in to save face or, whatever the case may be. I do remember times where I just couldn't make it in or didn't really didn't want to go in that day. But yeah, man, throughout my career, like there were a lot of moments. Like it's a long period of time, right? Like from 2010 to 2021, that's 11 years, right? And a lot of stuff happened in 11 years throughout my addiction, throughout the substance abuse and stuff like that. So yeah, there was a lot of everything. I guess ultimately at the end of the day, today, I'm just so happy and I'm so grateful that I'm no longer there, you know. Today, one day at a time.
Mhm.
I just celebrated 3 years, 3 years sobriety, which I'm so proud of, one day at a time. Someone reached out to me recently, asked me like, "How'd you get cured?" And it's like, I'm not cured. This is a daily practice kind of thing. So yeah, like it's good to have this conversation with you because it takes me back to the dark times and when there were some really, really challenging moments. And I think it's also important that I mentioned that it wasn't all dark. It's not like I
Yeah.
was, yeah, I was in a bit of a prison cell, air quotes. I was for a long time, but there were still a lot of beautiful moments, and there were still a lot of great experiences and moments and memories that I'll cherish forever. But there was this underlying darkness of lack of self-love, lack of honesty, lack of awareness, etc., etc.
No, I really like what you just said there, because I look back at my addiction, and there was some memories and some things that happened that I'll never forget, that were truly special to me. And even though, maybe that's what made me a little bit more special, because I had such like self disdain for myself. Like I just did not like myself. I did not, think highly of myself. My self worth was gone. And so when I had those moments that were like, a lot of fun, or something like that, I really held on to those. And I think that's a big part of it. And if you're having an honest conversation about substance use, you have to acknowledge the good times as well. Because I don't think we fall in love with it and get as obsessed with it as we do if there wasn't some benefit that we were getting out of it. And as you like managed through your substance use, did you have somebody that that you talked to about it? Did you ever try to get clean, or sober, like before that, you hit that 2021 year? Was there ever an effort to give it up in those moments?
Yeah, there were a few big ones. Most notably in 2014, I had just broken up with a girlfriend. She had gone and told my parents, specifically my mom, of my drug use and stuff like that. Her parents came over to my house and stuff like that too, and it was just a big mess. I had gone to treatment at that point. I'd gone to a place called Renaissance in Toronto, and I spent 3 weeks in house over there. I came out of Renaissance and I had about almost 10 months sobriety, but ultimately I stopped doing everything that was suggested to me to do, between 12 steps and meetings and fellowship and working with a sponsor and being honest and doing this work and all that kind of stuff. I stopped doing it. So I ultimately ended up relapsing after working at this really, really challenging restaurant job in the city. This is back in 2015. So yeah, there were a few moments, but Renaissance, or that 2014 period, would have been the biggest. It wasn't all lost as well, because when I went to Renaissance, I was reintroduced to the 12-step program because I went to my first meeting at 18 years old, by the way.
Mm.
But that whole
Okay.
period of sobriety didn't last long. So fast forward to 31 years old. Yeah, when I was at Renaissance, I learned about 12 steps, reintroduced, and I learned about ego deflation, which is like the biggest aha moment for me, because I realized about what ego was and what it was doing to me. It was very much like Devin wants this, when he wants it, how he wants it, where he wants it kind of thing. And I wasn't really thinking about anybody else around me. It's all about like, how can I get what I want? How can I look after Devin first? So yeah, 2014 was a pretty pivotal moment for me in my life. Although I went back out for multiple years after, I had another notch and layer of like shame put on it, because I knew a solution existed if I gave 100% to it, because people that I looked up to and respected were recovering as a result of doing that work.
Yeah, no, I that talking about that ego aspect of it, right? I mean, that's such a big part of it. I destroyed so much in my life because I needed that instant gratification. And that would show up not just with drugs, but with the way I treated people, with my relationships, with just like everything, that need for, I have to feel good in this moment because I need something to take me out of my own mind and take me out of my own thoughts. that just helped me destroy everything else on top of my life. Um, and I never fully got clean or sober while I was in my addiction, because I would always just go off hard drugs and drink and smoke weed for a while, and then eventually it would lead me back to that. And I always, like you just said, I always felt a bigger sense of shame every time. And I always went a little bit further each time. Each time I picked up the needle again, each time I picked up the dope again, it always got a little bit worse. So when you did go back out and you did have that relapse, did you see that coming? Did you, like, because they talk about how sometimes you can feel that coming, you can see it coming. Did you see it like happening, and did it did you pick up right where you left off, and just kind of, like you said in the beginning, you dove in, 2 feet?
Yeah, I definitely picked up. I mean, it took, I can't remember if it was a few weeks or a few months to get right back to where I was, but it was. I basically picked up right back where I left off. That's for
Mhm.
sure. Did I see it coming? I did, man. I remember having like getting off of work early one day, just at the 10-month mark, and I remember feeling like overwhelming anxiety and panic in me. And I remember going and picking up shortly after that. It's hard for me to look back and say now that I did see it coming. I'm sure I did. And the
Mhm.
reason why I'm saying that is because A, it was a long time ago, but B, everything that I had done to fill up my spiritual toolbox, with 12 steps and sponsorship and fellowship and all these things, recovery, all these recovery based tools that I had stopped nurturing them. That toolbox was getting really rusty. I hadn't opened it in a while. I stopped going to meetings. I stopped mucking with my sponsor. I stopped doing all the things that I was suggested. Like when you go to treatment or when you're trying to get help, they're like, do this, and this, right? Do all these different things. And I stopped doing all of those things. And shortly thereafter, yeah, man, like when times got really tough, I had nowhere to turn. I had no solution at that point. And I crumbled for sure, man.
Yeah, and that's the thing about recovery, right? And substance abuses. It really is something you have to take care of every day. It is something that you have to do at least a little bit of something to work on your recovery every single day. You start to lose that. And I know, like, so, I've been clean and sober about 9 years now. And although I haven't picked up, I've definitely been in moments where I stopped doing all those things. And even though I wasn't using, like, I was back in that mindset, like I was. Like, my self-worth was back down. I was back in a depressive state, and I just wasn't able to take care of my responsibilities like I was when I was, going to meetings, or when I was talking to people about recovery, or when I was keeping up on it. And it really is something that we kind of have to accept, that you have to work on this for the rest of your life. And you have to stay on top of it if you want to keep growing and keep going with it. So was there, as you kept going, and you relapsed and you went back out, this time, now that you've gotten clean, was there a, like, the quote unquote rock bottom moment for you, or was it like just a series of things that you decided, like, all right, I finally have to give this up, um going into this 3 years now that you've put together?
First and foremost, congrats on 9 years, man. That's
Yeah,
epic.
appreciate that.
Anytime I speak to anybody with sobriety like yourself, it's so inspirational, man. And I was sharing at my medallion recently that, like, looking around the room, I saw people with 9, 6, 10, 18, all this stuff, and I'm like, it's so important that you guys are around, right? Because it reminds me that even though I've stacked up a bunch of clean time, I need to keep showing up. And not just for the newcomer, but like ultimately, like I need to be coming for myself too. It's not
Mhm.
always just the newcomer that's struggling, right? We're all struggling at different, or
Yep.
I'm all struggling at different points in my life.
Yep.
So that's amazing, man. That's wicked. Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Um, yeah, brother. With me, it's like pandemic really put a lot of strain on me. I had started to do so much brand partnership work with the cooking videos and stuff, and my business model kind of transitioned. I was doing caterings and pop-ups and private events, and now it was like all brand partnership. Obviously, we're at home all day, and I was making crazy money in a very short amount of time. Like I would spend 2, 3, 4 days prepping for a catering, and then I could make that same amount with like an hour of work with a tripod and my phone. And it was just like, are you joking me? And I moved out of my parents' house. I was in and out. I had my own place, and I'm back and forth. I moved out of my parents' house. I moved into a place downtown, and just got reckless, man. Got really, really reckless, and drove myself into the ground. And then, yeah, in March of 21, decided to reach out for help.
Yeah, and when you say drove yourself into the ground, what did that process kind of look like for you? And I just asked that because like I especially around COVID and like I hear that like that was a really tough time for people. Now that I've talked to some different people, whether it was addiction or just depression or some other mental health issues, that seem to like really push people to their limits with being able to handle stuff because we lose out on that human interaction or like you said maybe you get something that's just this influx of cash and you get an opportunity that maybe you weren't 100% sure how to handle, but like what did that driving yourself into the ground look like over that period?
Yeah, it was just like a lot of use, a lot of partying day after day. I believe I was dealing with a lot of different things. I was dealing with that influx of money. I was dealing with the uncertainties and the eeriness of what was going on in the world around me and outside of my house, outside of my home. I was dealing with that. I was dealing with other people's emotions and stuff as well. Like we would get together, some friends. We were like hiding, it's secret. Like you can only have a certain amount of people over. Like all this, it was just weird. It was just really, really weird. I was dealing with all that shit. I was dealing with boredom as well, I'm sure. Like not being able to leave the house, not being able to be social, to go out, to do this, to do that. So I was just dealing with all these different things at that time. And of course, having me like as an individual who doesn't love himself very much and is not very aware of what's going on, not having the ability to process feelings and emotions or speak out on how I'm feeling. Like it was just not a good environment for me to be in, being in such a fragile state. Looking back now, I understand and I can see more at how fragile I was back then as well. So it was just like it just it just got really rough, man. And the use increased. I remember having to drive myself to the hospital a couple times. It got so bad, man. And they say the disease is progressive, right? It doesn't ever really subside with a type 3 type of addict like myself. It'll only increase, and I started to witness that. Like it was more frequent, like waking up and using all these things that I had never done before I started to do. So, yeah, it really amplified and I realized, yo, I'm gonna die. I need to get myself into treatment. A buddy of mine owned a treatment center, and I ended up reaching out to him. And after I reached out to him, he's on the phone. He's like, "Let's get you tapped in." I didn't know what it meant at the time. I know what it means now. But he said, "Let's get you tapped in." And I think I made my way into his treatment center like maybe 2 months after that call, bro. A month and a half, 2 months later. But finally got in there, and I haven't looked back since.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's amazing when you hit that moment and you really put the effort in, right? Like you really try and recover. You really take the time to do it and take it seriously. Because that's when you see the differences. That's when you see the changes. And you just mentioned that, you made that call and then there was a month, 2 month there, month and a half.
Yeah.
Were you clean during that time or were you just trying to
Hell
survive
no.
until you made it? Yeah.
Hell no. There's never a good time for stuff like that. It's like, oh man, I gotta film City Line. Oh, I got this event coming up. Oh, I'm just not ready. Oh, I gotta do my
Mhm.
laundry. Just whatever excuse I could find, bro, to not go in there. Ultimately, I knew it was what was best for me. I knew it was a life or death situation, but I was just pulling any excuse that I could, bro, because I'm like, oh, I'm not gonna be able to work for 3 weeks. I need to clear my calendar, this and that. I mean, ultimately, there's no good time to just kind of like, go dark for 3 weeks, depending on who you are and what your situation is. But for me at that time, I felt at that time that like this is going to be next to near impossible for me to clear my schedule for 3 weeks. And that also ties into the fact of like me wanting to always be in control and be the director and like, have final say in everything, that I do, kind of thing. So yeah, man, it took me a minimum of a month and a half to get into the treatment center after I made that initial call. When really I made that call and I should have driven right there. Drove right there.
Yeah, no, and I asked you that because there was like I was basically a homeless heroin addict right before I got clean, and I had done some things and my parents found out about it, so they reached back out and they said, "Hey, look, we'll help you through this if you finally give rehab a chance." Because I never tried rehab, I never tried to fully get clean, and they're like, "If you try, we will help you out." And
Right.
it was about 2 months that they took me back in before I actually made it to a rehab center, and I just went back to destroying their life once I came back in because I was stealing from them again, I was lying to them again, I was doing all this stuff. And I was making excuses of, well, I can't go to that rehab center. That one's 9 months long. I can't go to that one, or that one's too religious. I can't go to that one. Or, I was doing that same, and I didn't have anything going on in my life like you were. Like you might have had some responsibilities to take care of, but as addicts, we'll convince ourselves that there's a million reasons why we don't need to do this.
Yep.
And for me, I think it was really just a deep seated root in fear. Like I was so scared, man. I had been using since I was 11, 12 years old. And I had never sat with myself without being high, without smoking a joint or, having a drink. I never sat with myself. And so I was so terrified of what my life was going to be like. I was so terrified, for one, I wasn't going to be able to do it. I was terrified that I wasn't going to be able to handle some of the trauma that I knew was about to come back into my mind from when I was younger, and the things that happened through addiction. And it was a terrifying, a terrifying thing. And so just like for you going into it, was that I mean, since you had a little bit of clean time once before, years prior, were you able to pull from that, or were you still like scared and had some fear behind like, oh, I got to do this again?
Sorry, was I able to pull from what? Sorry.
Your first, that 10 months that you had prior, were
Oh,
you able to
oh
like kind of
man.
look at that experience at all?
Yeah, bro, definitely. And I'm glad you brought that up again because that was such a pivotal moment of my career. Uh, that was such a pivotal moment of my journey, not my career. Because I was reintroduced to 12 steps then. I started to take classes on like negative self-talk and all these different
Mhm.
things that I never really knew, that self-love and all these things that I never really knew mattered before, right? Everything was just so superficial in my mind. So yeah, for sure, I was able to pull a lot of stuff. Yo, check this. So in 2014, one of the counselors there who broke me, his job was to break people like myself who were so high on their on themselves. His
Uh-huh.
job was to crush us, right? And I actually shared when I was sharing at a meeting. I was the speaker at a meeting last week, and I mentioned this guy, and someone in the crowd, someone in the fellowship there knew exactly who I was talking about, and I could tell by their face they knew exactly who this guy was. He's a legend in the game. Anyways, he broke me down so hard. He crushed my spirits, bro, in such a good way. Because now when I look back, I'm so indebted to him. But I was asked, why do you get high? And my response was, why else? I like the feeling. Like, why else would I love the feeling of being high.
Mhm.
And the counselor was like, what's wrong with the way that you feel without it? And then I realized at that moment, it was a huge light bulb moment for me. I realized at that moment that I had major issues, like you said, sitting with myself. I had major issues with that. It was cold, it was icky, it was uncomfortable, it was unknown. I didn't like it. So I had to do whatever I could to alter my state of consciousness by ingesting whatever type of substance was around me, kind of thing, right? So that was a huge, huge moment for me. So yeah, there were all these tidbits and little things that were implanted in me, subconsciously or not, back at that time that I was able to draw on for when I went into rehab. Or treatment this most recent time in March of 21. When I came out of a month though, bro, I remember going to Markham. I was in a condo. My mom spent a couple nights with me. I remember, or the first night. Um, and I remember working really hard, taking over a food truck that weekend and working 3 days in a row. And I remember relapsing after it because I was so conditioned to a reward system that
Oh
was
yeah.
so overwhelmingly strong. You know, I knew like when I had the urge, like it was basically 5 p.m. after 5 days of work, 5 p.m. on a Sunday, it's sunny outside, and it's like, okay, get high. Like it's just biological clock, get high,
Mm.
right? And I messaged my sponsor right away. And in like the two, I didn't call him, I texted him. And in the 2 or 3 minutes that it took him to respond back to me, I'd already secured a dealer downtown,
Mm.
and I was on my way downtown to grab. Used for 2 days by myself, super paranoia, super shame, super embarrassed, super guilty. And then my sponsor was basically like, when we started mucking again, shortly after that, he's like, "Have you ever given the program 100%?" And I said, "No." And ever since then, May 10th, 21, I've been giving it 100% 1 day at a time, you know?
Yeah, and that makes a huge difference, right? When you actually like try and you really put yourself into it. When you went into rehab that time, or that your treatment center, did you experience any like withdrawals or like craving? Like how was getting through that for you? I don't know, exactly like what it looked like for you in using, but like did you do any detoxing first before like going into that and getting that stuff out of your system?
No, man, I didn't. My DOC was Coke. I did a bunch
Mm.
of shit, as many of us do.
Yeah. Yeah.
My DOC was Coke. When I went into, I had not used for 3 days prior to going in,
Mm.
because I was pretty committed to like giving it 100%. I walked in there being like, I got to figure this thing out. Like I'm dying, and this has to be it. The majority of people in there though were detoxing, whether it
Mhm.
was fentanyl or opiates or whatever the case may be, right? Whatever the DOC was. But me personally, no, I didn't. It was tough. It was very difficult for me, my story, my journey. But I found that with the cocaine use for me, it's like my style of use was very binging.
Mm.
I didn't ingest a little bit throughout the day and coast.
Mm.
I was always hammering hard, right? So I'd go hard for 3 days, then I'd be off for a day or
Yeah.
two. Like that was the way that I processed it. That was my
Mhm.
story kind of thing. So I think for that reason, I didn't really need to detox going into there. I remember now. It was like in February. I think I had one last bender with my friends and was out for a couple days, and then I just said, okay, let's just kind of get a clear head before going into this treatment center to give it 100%.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not even like just the physical aspects of withdrawals or cravings, right? Like, did you experience any of just the psychological ones? Like when you after you relapse and use for that couple days, then your sponsor said that to you, like, have you ever given it 100%? And you decided to. Was there any like psychological things? And I asked that because you even mentioned that like our reward system, right? Our like time clock of like, oh yeah, I just woke up, gotta go get high, or I just did something fun, gotta get high, or something just upset me, gotta get high. Like we develop these habits and these time clocks of just like, yeah, it's time to do that. Psychologically, were you able to overcome that pretty easily, or were there some moments, especially early on, where it was like, oh shit, I got to get through this somehow?
It was all difficult, man. It was all
Mm.
difficult. And I'll tell you the hardest part about all of it for me was me digging up. Remember you mentioned early childhood trauma and shit that, the hardest part for me was having to wade through all this shit without being able to resort to that joint or whatever that was to get out of myself. Because as I started to dig all that shit up, like the death of my brother, as I started to dig up all this shit that I had buried so deeply, my natural instinct is to grab something
Mm.
and get it into me to numb myself, right? And by having to like keep my hands behind my back and like go through this shit instead of going around it like I was always doing, that was the hardest part for me, man, for sure. Because at every instinct, I wanted to lash out. I wanted to fight, kick, scream, cry, yell, all these different types of things. And that was the most challenging part of all of it. Uh, at the same time, the most rewarding, It takes a lot more to rattle me these days. Am I rattle proof? Hell no. You know, something just happened here earlier today that kind of rattled me a bit, but I'm aware of it and I'm going to
Yeah.
address it as well. But I mean, like, before things used to set me off, man, and they don't set me off the way that they used to. I'm able to handle a lot more. Um, and I'm very proud and I'm very grateful for that because before it's just like any excuse I had to go use I would, and I would use it was my solution to life. I would use it to celebrate. I would use it to grieve. I would use it when I was bored. I would use it when it was 21 degrees Celsius outside on a Wednesday. Like it didn't matter what it was. It could be anything, right? It was my solution for life, right? So yeah.
Yeah, and that's just part of it, right? As an addict, we can find any reason to use in that moment or any reason to get high in that moment. But I want to just ask you about, addressing some of that trauma. Um, like, was it something that you were willing to dive into right away, or was it kind of like, I don't know if it was maybe therapy for you or counseling or just talking with your sponsor, even just talking to somebody about it. Was this something that they had to kind of pry at you to get out, or did you know you had to talk about it and kind of get it off your chest to be able to cope and to be able to not be, as rattled as maybe you were before?
I knew I had to get it out. I knew there was reasons for my heavy use, and I had gone to treatment with the understanding to myself, like, or with the intention of figuring out what it was. So however deep I had to dig, or however difficult it got, I knew that's just what I had to do because I knew on the outside, out of that bubble of treatment, I knew I was killing myself and I had to figure it out. And I didn't really know why I was doing it, man, to be honest with you. I had an idea. I had an idea of some things, but I was really open and I worked really hard in treatment, man. Although I relapsed when I came out, I worked real hard in treatment. And the counselors and stuff, they all voiced that to me as well. I was working with three different counselors at one point, writing letters to my dad and writing letters from my brother to my dad and like all kinds of shit. Like I was really, really, really giving a good effort in there. And it wasn't all lost, everything's experience in my opinion. But I knew I had to give it 100, man. I really, really did because I couldn't continue living the way I was living on the outside. I knew I was so much better. I knew I had so much more potential.
Yeah, no, and that's so important to really throw yourself into it and to really like just be honest with yourself in that moment. Like, yeah, it's scary. It's probably going to be painful. It's going to suck. You're going to, you might get some cravings or you might want to use, but it is so important to be honest in that moment. And I know like I had this moment where I tried to break out of rehab at like 2 in the morning, my first night there, because I was detoxing. I didn't, I didn't go to detox first. I went straight to rehab, and I felt like I was losing my mind. But as I made it outside in the snow and it was freezing cold, I just had that moment of like, do I want to die like this, or do I want to actually try? And I went in and I tried, and right away I told some of my counselors, I was like, look, these are a couple things I know I'm really going to struggle with and that are really heavy on my mind when I'm not using. So I got to figure out a healthier way to deal with this shit. I got to figure out a healthier way to cope or to work past some of these things. And so I think that plays such a big role in recovery is when you take that time to honestly like be proactive in trying to take care of that stuff. And as you work through some of that stuff, did you feel that like giving you some of that self-worth back? Did you feel, you starting to love yourself again? Because I know you've said that a few times throughout our conversation. And so I wanted to come back to that process of being okay with yourself and, starting to, see the worth in yourself and see the love in yourself and see, these amazing things about you. What was that process getting some of those positive feelings back about you?
Yeah, that was one of the biggest parts of my journey in recovery, was practicing self-love. Like when I think of like the biggest moments in my recovery, the one that always stands out the most is the ego deflation, which I talked about. That was really, really important for me because I was living with a lot of denial my whole life. that, I'm bad, but I'm not really that bad. And like, look at all these amazing things I'm doing outside of that. The other big one is the love, because I thought that I was loving myself by working hard and establishing myself and, making people around me happy and building a career. But really, ultimately, I was punishing myself with all the drug use and all the substance use, right? So getting that self-worth back and being able to start loving myself and rewarding myself in healthy ways, that was a very rewarding process for me. Um, I realize now that like my reward system is like waking up and going to the gym, or like
Mm.
having a nice breakfast, or creating time and space for someone that really deserves it in my life, or someone that's really had my back. Like these are all ways that, or traveling or whatever it is, these are all ways that I reward myself now. Whereas before it was like very much a prison system. It's like I work my ass off as hard as I can to just kind of lock myself away for the weekend or whatever it was. So yeah, man, I'm in a much different place. But again, it's all daily practice, the self-love thing, everything that I'm learning these days and practicing, like everything is just one day at a time, man, over here.
Yeah, and that's kind of the way you have to do it. You know, you don't want to get too cocky or confident in it because then you start letting those things slip away. You're like, oh, I'm good now. I don't have to keep doing this today, and that's where we can get ourselves into trouble. Um, but has there like one of the biggest things I found with getting clean and getting off drugs is I found a lot more healthier ways to cope. And I know you just mentioned what some of those may be for you. But like, what's one of those things you do when you can feel yourself like maybe doubting yourself a little bit, or you feel yourself having a bad day, or your mindset starts to change into a little bit more negative. What's one of those things that you like to do to kind of pull yourself back and change your perspective in that moment, or just sit with those feelings? But how do you like change course of that moment instead of letting it go back to like, oh, I'm going to use something because I'm uncomfortable right now.
It's a lot of it's breath work, man. A lot of it's
Mm.
breath work. I have this tendency to like lash out immediately, where I get so upset and so frustrated, where it's like I have to voice my opinion immediately. And then if I take like 5 to 10 deep breaths, it really settles, man. And then I end up like not saying anything, or I end up like not acting very erratically. So breath work for me has been very, very important, to be honest with you. There's a lot of times where like I'm about to say something that I'm going to regret or say something stupid, and just doing that breath work and taking a moment to kind of rein it back in, it helps save me some face, to be honest with you. But that
Yeah,
came with a lot of
no,
practice.
yeah, and that's I think that's a really good one. That breath work and just taking that moment to like breathe in and out, or however it is you do it, but to slow your reaction time down, right? Because we get that initial want to react, and then that's a really good way of kind of just taking a step back and calming yourself in that moment. As you now, you've put together, just over 3 years, which again, a day isn't easy for somebody that struggles with substance abuse. So, 3 years is huge, and doing what you do on top of that, seems like it's hectic and busy. So, do you, with the traveling, with the shows, with the events, are you intentional about finding moments to be a little selfish to take care of you? Like, how do you prioritize when you have all that going on and you're like, I still got to fit my recovery in here, or I'm going to lose all this, or maybe I'm not going to have as many opportunities. So, like, just kind of, I think that's a really big part of it, especially when you got a lot going on. How do you prioritize that a little bit with a schedule like yours?
The honest truth is that the beginning of this year I wasn't. I went to
Mm.
my home group meeting in April. We're what, early June now. I went there sometime in April and I shared, and I was like, man, I'm struggling a bit. Um, and I know why I'm struggling. It's because stopped. I started to put recovery in the rearview mirror. To be honest with you, I had been traveling a lot, and I know there's meetings everywhere, and there's meetings online. I could easily just check in with someone from the fellowship or my crew at the group or anybody in recovery. Like I just kind of started to pull away. I stopped working with. I didn't have any active sponsees at the time, so I wasn't really mucking anybody. And then slowly but surely, as I got back into the program, all these things started happening. For example, like I spoke at that group, I spoke at my medallion. Someone reached out to me to sponsor them. Like all these things just started happening out of nowhere. Some people reached out to me online. That were like, and I had not had to, I had a conversation with someone for like 40 minutes about recovery. I did another Gents Talk podcast, which is a podcast which provides men a safe space to be very vulnerable. Like all these things started landsliding out of nowhere. When it rains, it pours. But to be honest with you, I had started to put recovery in the rearview mirror, and it reminded me that I need to. It's in my best interest to just really always keep it front and center as much as possible. And it was a good reminder because I'm not perfect, and I don't have perfect days, and I'm not like running this perfect recovery mission or journey, right? Like I'm learning throughout the whole thing. Think what was important in that last part is I didn't let it get to a point where I ended up picking up, but the voices in my head were getting louder, and like things were, I've started to see myself lashing out a little bit more and becoming a little bit more irritable, restless, irritable, discontent. You know what I'm saying? So I'm glad I recognized it and got my ass back into the rooms and where I needed to be, and that's very important for me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've just over 9 years, and right before I hit 9 years, I had to have a moment where I had to accept again that this is for life. Because everything you just explained is something I went through just 6, 7 months ago.
Yep.
To where I was pissed off, I was irritable, I was frustrated, I was depressed, and it was just I got to keep doing this for the rest of my life if I want to continue that growth and for it to be different. And so that's a big part of recovery. As long as like the biggest thing of staying perfect in is not picking up, right? Nothing else is going to be perfect. Nothing else is gonna always be great. But as long as you don't pick up again, that's where you can at least continue that journey with it. And with everything you're doing and everything you got going on, I just want to say again, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on here and be vulnerable and to share those experiences, because I do see a lot of power when people are open about it. And so one of the last things I want to ask you as we get closer to wrapping up, you had mentioned the men's mental health thing. And so I just want to just ask you a brief question, like, have you ever felt it was harder for you to open up and be vulnerable and say like, yeah, I have the flaws in this, or I struggle in that? Has that ever kept you from opening up and being authentic in your feelings?
It's just been a journey, man. It's been my journey. There's been a lot of ups and downs with it. There's been a lot of like, what are people gonna think? What are they gonna say? Am I gonna come off as weak? Like all these thoughts go through my head. Am I gonna be judged? Are people gonna accept me? Are they gonna reject me? All these things go through my head. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I know it's best for me to be open and vulnerable because for the majority of my life, I wore a mask and I wasn't. And as much as it is about me, it's also not about me. I want to speak up as much as I can so people, especially young men, young brown men, people that look like me,
Hmm.
people with the color of my skin, they can know that it's okay to not be okay, and there's someone out there struggling with some of the things that they're struggling with, and that there are ways to recover and get better, and that it's important that we discuss them and talk about it instead of sweep this shit under the rug. So, it's like I think I mentioned this at the beginning. It's like I want to leverage my platform for good, man. And I want to encourage more men to speak up about how they're feeling and break that stigma. And that's why I'm on this podcast. And that's why I did one earlier. And that's why I post on Instagram. And that's why I do all these things. This is why I raise money for this charity or whatever it is and really build that awareness. It's just so that we can break those stigmas surrounding men's mental health.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with everything you just said. I think it's so important to be able to do that and show like, you know, just because you're authentic in yourself and authentic in your feelings, and be able to admit you're struggling, does not make you weak, does not make you less than, does not make you, any worse than anybody else. Because if every one of us sat down and had this conversation, we could all talk about our vulnerabilities and our insecurities, and where we feel like we fall short as men. And so I appreciate that aspect of it as well. I've just seen some, I've coached soccer now for the last 8, 9 years, and
Nice.
unfortunately, I've even had some of my former players, take their own life with that pressure and with not opening up.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate, like, when a guy comes on and is able to share like you shared. on this platform. So I really appreciate you and your time. Um, and just kind of as we go out, I always like to give my guests the last word, and any advice or anything you want to talk about that you have coming up, or just anything to send us off with today.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate your time as well, my bro. I mean, I'm very grateful for this journey. For a long period of time, I regretted my past and I regretted all the shit that I've been through, but it's led me to where I am today, and I wouldn't change anything if I could. One of the things I'm most proud of today is my accountability and my ability to show up and over deliver. And that's not just work wise, but that's just in life with relationships, with my parents, with podcasts like this, with whatever it is. And I'm going to continue to strive to hit my max potential. Everything these days is about the cookbook. My debut cookbook is performing really, really well, and it's exciting. I'm literally traveling the world with it. I'm super easy to find as well. You can literally Google Chef Dev, but Chef Devan, Devan on social and stuff, chefdev.ca. If you ever want to chat, if you ever want to learn more about me and stuff, see the cooking videos, see the passion, then you can look me up. But yeah, I'm gonna continue one day at a time doing what I'm doing, and appreciate people like you, um, providing me with a space to share a bit of my story and ultimately do for others.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I'm gonna put your links in the description of the video.
Yeah.
So definitely go check them out. I love your Instagram. It makes me hungry every time I look at it. And me and my wife are trying to get some time to try cooking something that you have out there. But it is, I mean, not only does the food look delicious, but the personality you bring into what you do is what makes it really entertaining. You can see the passion when you're doing it, which I think is always a special thing. When you can see that happiness in what somebody's doing, that's what makes
Yeah.
that even more exciting. And so definitely go check out Chef Dev. Get the cookbook, try cooking some of the food. But definitely somebody who's inspiring, not only in a journey of following your passions, but also inspiring in a way of being vulnerable, opening up, and showing that we all continue to grow throughout this life. So again, I appreciate your time, man. Thank you so much. I'm glad we were able to get it together and work it out. I really do appreciate your time, and thank you so much for coming on and sharing your journey with us.
Thank you. Mad love.
Awesome. And it's been Illuminate, Navigate, Radiate. Have a great rest of your day.